Today on the show, I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Rachel Marie Martin, who has built up a huge following of over 1 million people on her Facebook account through sharing her stories of joy and her journey of motherhood. She has a teenage son who has celiac disease, and she shares all about her journey with getting her son's diagnosis, thankfully through the help of an incredible nurse. We talked about so many great topics to help you feel more empowered living with celiac disease and find joy in your life. She's also the author of multiple books, which we'll talk about as well. So welcome to the show and enjoy our conversation. Welcome to the Healthy Celiac Show. I'm your host, Belinda Whelan from belindawhelan.com, and here you will learn to live your very best life with celiac disease. So we are going to be talking all about health-related topics because you, my friend, are more than just a woman with celiac disease. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss an episode, and welcome to the show. All right, welcome back to this week's episode. I'm so excited to talk with Rachel Marie Martin this week on the show, and she has a big family, which I'm super excited to learn more about, and one of her sons has celiac disease. So welcome to the show, Rachel. It's so great to meet you and have you on today's episode.
I'm super excited to be here, so thank you for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. So whereabouts are you located, just so everyone knows who I'm talking to and where?
All right. I live in Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, beautiful.
So
Okay.
people are always like, really? You live there? I'm like, yes, I do.
Yeah.
Tourist city.
Yeah, other side of the world to me.
Yes, yes.
It's great to connect, and that's why we love technology. And
I do. I love technology.
Yeah, it's
yes.
great. So first of all, I'd love for you to share the story of your son, Sam, and how he was diagnosed with celiac disease.
Okay, well, I have to back up because it was actually in 2011, and I didn't even really know about celiac disease at that point in my life. I knew I had done some wheat elimination diets of my own prior to that, so I kind of knew about elimination and all of that. But my son, he at about 9, 12 months of age started just failure to thrive, kept getting sick all the time, and didn't know what was wrong. And towards the end, so he was diagnosed in January, and in December, I had a friend that came up to me and said, something's not right with Samuel. And when you have your child with you all the time, it's kind of that slow fade. Now I can look back at pictures and go, oh my goodness, how did I not see his eyes? Like, how did I not see it? But he just refused to, he stopped eating, basically, is what happened. He had zero interest in table food, and he almost reverted to being a newborn, went back to breastfeeding and all of that. And I didn't know what was going on. So finally I kept taking him to the doctor. And because I have a very large family, Samuel is the 7th of my own biological 7 children. So I kind of knew something wasn't right, but the doctors kept saying, you know what, he's in a large family, he's exposed to a lot of stuff, it's probably nothing to worry about. And they kept misdiagnosing, and they prescribed him to take Miralax. And I really think that was the straw that broke the camel's back, because for Samuel, he had a lot of intestinal bleeding. And once he took that, it was excruciating pain. And so a friend of mine said, you need to take him to the hospital. Well, it was actually her father-in-law was a doctor, and he said, you need to take this child in. And I did.
Yeah.
And when we got there, his temperature was well below normal. And even then, the doctors were like, it's probably nothing. Like, I just kept proving myself.
Yeah.
They're like, what did he eat? And I said, well, he had a little bit of a sandwich. And then they would say, well, if you think it's celiac disease, because my friend's dad said, you need to test him for this. Why'd you give him sandwich? And I'm like, well, I don't know what it is. I'd have to fight.
Yeah.
And the thing that got him admitted was they gave him a juice box, and he drank the juice box, and immediately he went straight and like as a board and screamed in pain. And the nurse was like, oh my goodness, like she witnessed it. She goes, I need you to do this again. And she went running down the hallway to get the doctor. And the doctor came in, and I was like, Sam, you have to drink again. And the child, he doesn't want to at that point. But he did. And then the doctor realized something is actually wrong.
Yeah.
And what they realized was his entire intestinal tract was completely raw at that point. So when he drank the juice, it just was like acid on it.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
was admitted and had the celiac panel, which all the numbers came back high. And then we actually were sent home. And then the next day they said, we need you to come back immediately for endoscopy. And then he had the endoscopy and then they verified it.
Yeah.
And that was the start of the journey.
Wow, just amazing. And do you feel like as a parent, you really have to stand up for your children, don't you? You really have to advocate for them and be their voice, because clearly your son was not thriving. He was in pain. He was struggling. But yet
Right.
the medical system just thinks it's fine,
I
you know?
Yeah, I've written a lot about it and I've talked about it. I was really grateful I had a good friend that came with me because you can kind of get beaten down,
Mhm.
like the questions and all of that.
Yeah.
And then you start to question yourself. I'm making a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
But I really had to be an advocate, especially because about a week prior, they had done all the allergy panel tests. And so on the
Okay.
tests, it came back that he wasn't allergic, which I love telling people. It came back, he's not allergic to wheat.
Mm.
So the
Different.
doctor's
Yeah.
like, well, he's not allergic to wheat.
Yep.
And now I know they're totally different.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
you can't rely just on that.
Mhm.
So I did learn to keep a journal. And that journal was one of the things that really helped me. So for about 6 months of his life, when he started getting sick to afterwards, he ended up seeing an immunologist too. I kept a very detailed journal of when he'd get a fever and all these things. And because of that journal, the doctors at the University of Minnesota, because I was living there at the time, said that one of their standard protocol for children that come in with recurrent fevers now will be to test for celiac because Sam presented with that.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it?
So,
Wow.
yeah, I was so like, okay, yes.
It's making a difference, isn't it? And helping others.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yes.
a big step. Wow, that's
Yes.
fantastic. Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
So all of your other children have been screened, you told me, and at this point they don't have celiac disease. So how does that play out in your household? So there's 11 children and you and your
Right.
husband. And
Yes,
so,
we have a new blended family.
yeah,
Yes.
which is amazing. Like
Yep.
two for mum.
Yep.
I've got 3 kids. I don't know how you do it.
You do what you have to do is what I say. Yes.
You just make it work, don't you? So do you have gluten in your household? How do you make that work and keep Sam safe?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually do, especially part of the thing that I've learned about gluten-free and celiac and is that for a lot of families, it's incredibly expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So when Samuel was first diagnosed, the budget didn't allow for me to make the entire house gluten-free.
Yeah.
And so I was very, very diligent. We had a separate toaster, everything was separate.
Yeah.
And I would say that our house converted to 90 to 95% gluten-free.
Okay.
And Samuel's older brother, Elijah, I would say he was like the protector. Anytime Sam would get anything, he'd come running into the room. Is it gluten-free?
Oh,
and
so wonderful.
Everyone knew because they all saw him at his lowest.
Yeah.
They all knew to like step up the game. Now, when I would say that 90% has kind of carried through now. So even with my other kids, like their exposure to gluten, it's so much less than the average person.
Yeah, definitely. And as a teenager, how does he cope these days? Like, is it just normal to him? Does he feel like he's missing out? What's his kind of view on it? Or is it it's just what he has to do to feel good?
I think he'll tell you it's all he knows.
Yeah.
There's a benefit and because I've seen it with like I will be like, there's things I really miss because I don't eat gluten at all.
Yeah, because you remember it's different. Yeah.
I do. I remember. So like one time there was this really great gluten-free baker that was making croissants. And I'm like, if you can nail that, I'm going to stand in line for 2 hours. Yeah. And he did. It was phenomenal. But for Samuel, he's just not experienced that elasticity of baked goods is what I think of it.
Yeah.
I would say he is an advocate. One of the things that I'm the most proud of raising a child with celiac disease is raising him to be a complete advocate for himself,
Yeah.
to the point of if we go out to eat, he handles it all himself now. Of course, I listen, the mom
Yeah.
part, but he does handle it, like ask all the questions, and that just comes from learning it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is he knows the outcome if he isn't gluten
Mhm.
free.
Yeah.
So that helps too.
Yeah, that's wonderful, isn't it? My son was 4 when he had to start eating gluten-free, so he's got non-celiac gluten sensitivity, but he was so sick. He was the same, just looked
Right.
so under the eyes, and just he was awful. So he's a little bit different because he remembers having all these amazing foods, but because
Oh,
he felt so sick, he doesn't ever want to eat it. Like, he never sneaks things or says that he wants to eat gluten because he remembers how awful he felt. So I think it
interesting.
is interesting how that plays out. But yeah, that's so good that he can advocate for himself, and you've taught him that,
Yeah.
which is huge, because I do see a lot of parents who take the reins and they don't, let their children take control of their celiac disease, and
Right.
he's going to leave home, and that's going to be an amazing part of his life that he can do that for himself. So good on you.
Yeah, thank you. I always say that you're living gluten-free in a very gluten-full world,
Mm,
and it's how to navigate that in there without it being something that's negative.
yeah.
And like what I've learned from Sam is he just sees the good. I remember one time it was a Christmas and there was all these it was a table full of cookies,
Yeah.
and the mom was like, oh, he can't have any. And someone brought out a box of, and remember, this is a decade ago,
Mhm.
of box gluten-free cookies, not quite as amazing as they are now, but he was thrilled. He was thrilled. And I
Yeah.
thought, what a good life lesson, because he sees what he can have and he's grateful for that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that part's cool.
Yeah.
And now as a teenager, there's so many apps too. There's
Mhm.
so many resources
Yeah.
for him
Yeah.
versus me with my big book
Yeah.
at the grocery store.
It's changed, hasn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And how does he navigate with friends? Does he have a supportive group of friends that, he can feel like he can just be completely himself and comfortable around? Does he find that that's a big part of being a teenager?
I think he does. I think he has no problems with his friends. I think I'm the one that's
Okay.
always a little bit more like, not with his friends, but with school. Like if
Yeah.
it's a pizza party after school, I always want to try to fix it. Or if
Yeah.
it's something before a football game where they're going to do it. And what I've learned is if I kind of step back and let him manage it, it gets taken care of. Or like the teachers will make accommodations for him. Maybe he can't have the pizza,
Yeah.
but he can have something else.
Yeah.
And that part is, as a parent, I just didn't want there to always be like, well, I can't eat that. I can't eat that.
Mm.
But we've just learned to navigate it. And
Yeah.
for a long time, schools didn't do treats for birthdays, which I loved. I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
This is so good because I never had to worry. But we would have frozen gluten-free cupcakes in our freezer for birthday parties and just bring them along.
Yep. That's what we do too. And it works.
Yep,
So
it
yeah.
does.
Yep.
Does.
Yeah.
Same
Oh,
chocolate cupcake
yeah.
once again.
Every time.
Yep.
Yeah, but that's it. You just make it their normal, and they become, accepting of that, and like you
Right.
say, advocating for himself. And if he can do that
Right.
now, he's going to go out into the workforce one day and be able to stick up for himself. And I speak to so many people that say that they feel left out at work, and have to coach them
Right.
through. You've got to stand up for yourself. You've got to speak to your management and your HR department, and make sure you're being
Right.
looked after. So Sam will probably be amazing at that one day.
Yeah, I think it really is important for us as parents to model it.
Yeah.
I ended up getting him like a 503. I think that education thing where the school had to make sure that his classroom was accommodating for gluten-free
Yeah.
so that it wasn't different. And what's amazing for me about that is I shared with you about this before we started that I have a niece that has celiac disease, and my sister watched what I did, and she's got the same thing with my niece that's happening. And it's really powerful because I know that it creates change.
Yeah.
And then even just 3 houses, no, actually about 5 houses down, there's a mom that I met at the grocery store.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're my neighbor. And then I looked in her cart and I said, wait, you have a lot of, I like recognize the gluten-free goodness.
Yeah.
And then I found out her daughter has celiac disease.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
I think that there's more of us out
Mhm.
there than we
Yes.
think.
Yes. It brings people together, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I was like, I like those crackers.
Yeah. It's always nice to be able to find something in common with a fellow celiac. So yeah,
Yes.
yeah, beautiful.
So true.
So over the years, you've gone through some major challenges and some major life changes and come out the other side and just, shared your story through a couple of books with a new book on the way. And you share a lot about how you found joy in your life. Do you want to share a little bit about that story? Because having a child with celiac disease is challenging. Absolutely. I have absolutely no doubt that that is a huge challenge for people. But you've gone through some adversity and you have just, created such a positive life for your family, and you are a role model to hundreds of thousands of people around the world. So do you want to share a little bit more about you as well? Because I think you are
All right. Well, you made me very teary. That was very kind. I appreciate that. The best way I can describe the joy part, it's going to be a celiac story, but when I grew up, my grandmother used to make unbelievable Christmas cookies. Like I'm talking tin after tin of Christmas cookies. And I used to sneak out and get them. And it was part of my story. So when I became a mom, I took my grandmother's recipes and I started making all these cookies. And then the year Samuel was diagnosed, I thought, well, I'm going to make these cookies. And every single one, it was like the cookie pan was just one blob of whatever. None of them worked.
Yeah.
None of them worked. And I remember just this devastation. And it was such a simple thing, but it was this family heritage.
Tradition.
And a friend of mine said, Rach, she said, you'll never make the cookies like your grandmother did, but you can figure out a way to make them in the future that are just as amazing. And fast forward to maybe about 7 years after Sam was diagnosed, and I'm on my counter rolling out my grandmother's Moravian gingerbread cookies, gluten-free, and Sam is sneaking a piece. And I thought, she's absolutely right. And so I think with life, that's part of life, is being willing to say, I have to move forward. Maybe it's not going to be the same, but it can be good.
Yeah.
So in my own story, I went through financial problems and I went through a divorce, and then I was a single mom, and, sprinkled in there was health stuff. And I've learned that joy is really found in being willing to say and look for something good in the moment now, even if it's rough.
Yeah.
And when you have that posture, you start to see things.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I hope you don't mind. I just want to read something that I took off your website last night.
Okay.
I thought was powerful. So sometimes you have to let go of the pictures of what you thought life would be like and learn to find joy in the story you are actually living. This speaks to my soul, and I just think it's so powerful and so true, because, so many people are out there going, woe is me, and focus on the negative, and they don't focus on the good. They're not focusing on, what is the positive of having celiac disease? What is the positive of feeling better and moving forward with your life? So that is everything, and that is what I love to teach and share with people. So I love that you are such a role model for so many people with this finding joy and sharing that story with people.
Thank you. Thank you. That quote's very important to me. It was written on a very challenging moment in my life. I was with one of my children, was going through kind of an estrangement, and no one ever plans for the hard stuff. I always say nobody puts in their yearbook when they graduate from high school, it'd be great is when I'm 40, I'm going to go through divorce, I'm going to get diagnosed with something. And then when it happens, we're like, well, how did that happen? And I think that we all have this story. We all have these moments of, I never saw that coming.
Yeah.
And we're given the life in front of us now, the story that we have left. And it's up to each of us to figure out, okay, well, how can I find joy? How can I make this good? How can I see, just like Sam did years ago, how can I be grateful for what I can have versus being annoyed at what I can't?
Yeah, definitely. And that's a big part of your upcoming book. Is that correct?
It is. It is. In fact, I share the story more deeper about that quote in my book. It's in, I think, the first or second chapter. So my book is Get Your Spark Back. And it was inspired by really thousands of emails that I would get from people saying, well, how do I get my spark back?
Oh,
And a lot of people will get to that point, that transition point. But I think COVID did that too for many of us, where we're like,
yes.
whoa,
Yep.
who am I now?
Yep.
What am I going to do? And the question is always, how do I get my spark back? And it's always possessive. Everybody knows they have one.
Yeah.
And it's never, how do I get a spark? It's always, how do I get it back? And I think that's powerful, that yearning to get it back, because when you have that spark, that's when happiness and joy and all those good emotions and opportunities open up. So
Yeah.
the book is the answer to how do you get it back.
Fantastic. Sounds amazing.
Thank you.
I know
I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud
imagine,
of it.
and you should be. Anyone that writes a book, I just take my
Oh,
and just think it's incredible.
you should tell me that when I'm in the middle of it. Oh my goodness.
That's
Because
a
I'm like,
different
what am
story.
I doing?
Yeah. So this is your third book, is that right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is my third book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I am definitely going to be getting a copy and reading that one. And I see motherhood is definitely one of those things that people's spark kind of goes away a little bit, because they're so we as women, we're so focused on our children. We're so focused on what they need that we tend to put them before ourselves. And that happens, worldwide. We're not just talking, people that have a lot. We're talking about people that don't have much. They will still give to their children before themselves. So yeah, lots of mums listening, I'm sure will get a lot out of your book. And people that have got celiac disease, I think this can help them see the positive side and feeling good about themselves, because there is a lot of feeling down after a diagnosis and going down, that downward spiral that we don't need to be going on. So
No. And I remember for me with Samuel, because when he was so sick, almost being, which is kind of strange when I think back, almost grateful I knew what it was.
Yes.
Because he was so terribly sick and I just think 100 years ago, I don't think he would have made it.
No.
And just being so grateful, I knew what it was.
Yep.
And I knew what I could do.
Yes.
And that's power. And that's the power I think about when you look at it and you think, you know what, there's so much I can do. That's great.
Yep.
And every time we talk about it that way, we're actually bringing awareness to it. I look back at my own story with him, and as a younger writer on the internet, I shared a lot of his story, and in the sharing helped other people go, you know what? I know of this person whose child was diagnosed. Would you run that panel?
Yeah.
And I'm a big advocate for it. Can you just run the panel?
Yeah.
Just run the panel.
Yeah.
You're already poking them.
That's right.
Just
exactly.
one more test.
One more test. That's exactly right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Amazing story. Love it.
No.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share or talk about that you think could be beneficial?
Well, I think that part of whether it's not having your spark or being diagnosed with celiac or raising a child with it, the biggest thing that a lot of us deal with is feeling alone. Mm. And I'm here to say you're really not alone. Fine. You're not alone on those days when you're like, I can remember crying in the grocery store because the almond flour that I was buying was like 5 times the price of the regular flour on that. Yeah. And just feeling completely overwhelmed by the whole process. Yeah. And the thing is you'll get through it. It's not immediate. It's just one step after another step. It's like those cookies, one attempt after another attempt until now it's the new normal. Yeah. And I'm so grateful for it. Yeah. So you're definitely not alone, and you definitely will get through, and there can be a lot of good.
Fantastic advice. Beautiful. All right. So if people want to connect with you, where can they find you? Where's the best place to connect and share all the things?
All right. Well, you can find me on the internet at findingjoy.net or on Facebook at Finding Joy blog, and all the details are there. So if you heard this, you feel free to send me a message.
Yeah, wonderful. And we'll pop all the links below in the show notes, and you can pre-order Rachel's new book now. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep. It releases August 27th, and I'm very grateful for those pre-orders. So thank you.
Wonderful. All right. We will pop a link to the pre-order form as well over on Amazon, so you can check out Rachel's new book, but go and check out her previous books as well. And like I said, I'll pop all the show notes below, all the links below in the show notes, and you can learn more about Rachel there. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for your time, Rachel. Really appreciate having you on the show.
I appreciated it too. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, head to belindawhelan.com to get yourself a free copy of my exclusive ebook, 11 Mistakes People Make Going Gluten-Free Living with Celiac Disease.